Well, good afternoon. I have been looking forward to this for a while, and I think a lot of people on TikTok and all over social media are. We have the man, the myth, the legend himself, Josh Creature Preacher. And I have to say, it's one of those things where I saw you, I don't know how long ago, and I would watch, and you're just like this force, and you're like, okay, this person knows what they're doing, and then they're going to become something, whatever direction it goes. And as time goes on, you did this one thing. You went kayaking. You jumped off the skyway basically to go kayaking with the fishing guide.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, he's in Florida. I didn't realize you were in Florida until then. I'm like, oh, that's my neck of the woods. I live in Pinellas there. So I saw that, and I'm like, okay, that's awesome. And then shortly after that, I think we started chatting a little bit. And of course, it's always something. But I am glad to have you here, and I really appreciate you wanting to do an interview.
Thank you, Dean. Listen, I've been following you probably longer than you've been following me. I sure love your stuff over on YouTube, all over the place. I really enjoy it. There's a lot of times you pick up something that I've missed. I go, I didn't even hear about it.
I spend a lot of time looking up news stuff. Yeah. And trying to, I think that we do come at things a different way, but I think it kind of covers the basis of, but like you did something not too long ago on the giants, the giants in the caves in what is it, Afghanistan? And I remember watching that stuff on that years ago, and I forgot about it completely. And then you're doing it, and I'm like, oh, I see what he's doing. Okay, I see it. I was like, that's very interesting. And your people who follow you for that stuff love it. And I'm like, okay, well, there you go.
I love cryptozoology, and giants fall right into that. I kind of put them in a different class than hairy hominids like Bigfoot, Yeti, Yower, and all the others. But I've always been fascinated ever since I was a kid. And I'll tell you where it all kind of began with. When I was young, my parents didn't deny any access to education material in my home, and everything was educational material. Both my mother was highly educated, my father was a scientist, and I wasn't speaking when I was very little. I didn't speak till I was 4, so I did a lot of reading and research, and even when I was little, taught myself to read. But in one of the books that I had that I was fascinated with, it was an old bestiary, a very, very old one. And it had things like the cockatrice and the basilisk alongside things like the rattlesnake.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, reading that as a child, seeing all these, and it really was neat how they had the descriptions of these animals. It was very much like any other educational material you would find on like Audubon Society, but it was for unicorns and dragons.
Yeah.
And how fascinating that was. And even as a child, I saw the correlation between some of these things, and I wondered, and I've always wondered about those. But my Uncle George used to say as a child, and I picked up on that, I'd rather be the man that believes everything and is proved a fool than the man that believes nothing and is proven right. And to be honest with you, that's how I kind of live my life these days.
Yeah.
Because there is, and all these folk tales and all these stories, there are truths. There's kernels of truths in it. And I love people putting those together. Even in the story time that I do, people think they're all made up, and some of them very much are. In story time, it's a conglomeration of all these different truths, and you get to find out where they're at. But I've always been fascinated that the natural world is something that, to me, is the most important thing that we disregard. And it's our table. We all share it together. And you and I are both in the business of shaping animals. That's what this is all about, and educating people and instilling a passion in them. They might have one tap, maybe they've never had it. But by golly, they should. But
yeah,
think about all these things. Right now, there's animals, you and I both know there's animals that are on their last leg. I can hold up my hand. There's species of animals that I can hold up my hand or hands, and that's all they have. They number in the 5s or the 10s, and it's crazy. Things like the vaquita dolphin. It's a man-sized cetacean.
Yep.
And I call them Captain Jack Sparrow dolphins. They're so beautiful. They have a little eyeliner in their eye. The fact is, we're going to lose them real soon.
Yeah, we are. I recently did something on that. We're putting embargoes on Mexico until they do something about it, because as I said, there's 10 left, and they're still being fished. They're dying in the nets. and they're not even going after the dolphin. They're just dying in the nets, and yeah, it's sad.
Yeah, there's a specific fish that they target there, and bycatches many times the vaquita, which means little cow in Spanish. They do look like a little cow.
They do, and it's nuts. It's definitely nuts.
It is.
You know, speaking of which, I just heard something today, like specifically at there's a group that does like pelican stuff. They're very big into the seabird, like protecting seabirds, which is great. I'm not against that, but then they target they're targeting the fishermen, and they're trying to pass regulations on like things that you're allowed to use for bait and like different types of hooks and blah blah blah, whatever it is. But these same people are caught on the piers feeding the pelicans and like going out of their way to make pelicans associate people with food, and it's like you're not helping there either. Like you can be an animal lover and wanting to fix the problem without causing more issues, which is what seems like most of these things are.
Yeah. And when we try to help, sometimes you're right, we can hurt. There's a lot of like in Florida. We both live in Florida. We both have had dealings with FWC.
Oh, yeah.
Everything that comes out of FWC changes within a short time, because it usually doesn't work, so they try something else.
Yeah.
Right now, with Burmese pythons, with tegu, with some of the invasive species, I think they're dropping the damn ball.
They are.
Why? That I personally think that. And
I get crap for it because I criticize them all the time about how it's done, and they have turned it into another commodity. They've like with the python hunting thing, and like they have turned it into like you can't go into Everglades National Park and pick up a python and take it out of there. You will be fined. How does that make any sense?
And the funniest thing is, that's exactly what they told you to do a few seasons back. In fact, when this first started to be an issue and you were allowed to hunt them, they wanted people to run them over on the road. They were considering making it a crime if you saw one on the road and you veered away from it. Seriously.
Yeah.
Now, when first started the hunting, people were collecting them and they said, well, let's euthanize them in a humane manner. So what that meant was let's put them in a freezer.
Yeah.
So people were driving. You live in Pinellas, so people were driving Everglades to Pinellas or Orlando. Snakes were getting out, So then the FWC started this new program where you have to spike them on site. You have to deliver a humane blow to the brain cancer. And like you said, even if I pick up a neonate and show it off to you and I carry it 10 feet, I've committed a crime.
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with the tegus right now that breaks my heart, I've seen this firsthand. It used to be that people were highly motivated by money. People like you and I, maybe, that, or people that worked hard during the day, they would go out at night and they would collect tegus. They would sell them for pets.
Yeah.
They would collect snakes and sell them for pets. They made a good lick off of it, and they also removed invasive species from the environment. Well, FWC said no more of this. So people that were highly motivated by money to go out and collect and give these invasives as pets elsewhere, I saw traps full of traps of dying tegus, brother, and it killed me. I mean, it killed me. Can't let them go. I can't do anything about it.
They're still animals,
So these traps they'll be there forever. And the lizards get in. What happens is the tegu gets in the trap, and they were baited originally with stinky eggs. First tegu comes in, dies in the trap after a long time frame. It takes a long time for a tegu to die in the trap. It's brutal, like if it was a person. And what happens is it dies, and another tegu smells, and it comes in and begins eating it, and it dies in the trap. So it's a cycle. And I was looking at traps with skeletons, 6, 7, 8 skeletons, and it's just people were collecting them before. And the reason that this kills me, not only for the tegu suffering, and they do suffer, but the fact that now the population, we'll go out there sometime when we go preaching here. I'll take you to the spot. It'll break you. But there's some really good eastern diamondbacks there too, so that'll make us happy.
Oh, yeah.
These tegu are everywhere, and I mean everywhere. And the reason you're not seeing so many of the snakes and things is because of the tegu. I mean, you can't walk 10 feet down the path without spooking one. Used to be you'd have to look for them there, but no longer because FWC says, hey, hands off. They're still trapping, they're still studying and doing all these things. But in the meantime, there's no controlling what's going on there now over at Homestead with these tegus. There's just none.
Imagine if it was a cat that they were doing that to. And I hate to say it like that. I hate to bring up cats all the time, but it's like our hands are, we can't mess with the cat. because they know how much crap they'll get if they start messing with feral cats.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. You see cats, feral cats. And in fact, the funny thing is, it's not funny, but cats are gangster. They're survivors.
Yes, they are. They're too good at what they do. That's the problem.
Man. They're gangsters. They live no matter where you put them. But they're out in the Everglades. The little son of a guns are surviving when nothing else is. They somehow are surviving for these pythons.
You know how many times I've seen cats on Loop Road? You go down Loop Road and there's cats everywhere.
They're gangsters, man. They really are. They're the first to bounce back.
And then,
But, it's a problem unfortunately, it's going to be a problem for future generations with these invasives. And the python hunts and these things are, sorry guys, but it's kind of a sham in some ways because, many of the shows that we're seeing, people are collecting the snakes and putting them out there and they're, hey, look what I found. Yeah. Not only that, but they're getting none of the snakes when it comes to the overall population of these pythons. And we can celebrate catching a 16-foot berm all we want, but there's 999 other thousand probably out there that are doing the same thing.
All the other invasives. There's Quaker parrots, green parrots, everywhere. Yeah. Invasive. They may not do as much harm. Granted, there's plenty of them that don't, but there's a lot of native stuff like the brown anole, Cuban anole, whatever you want to call it, everywhere throughout the state of Florida. They're not native. They've pushed out the native green anole or Carolina anole, whatever you want to call it. And it's just or they've moved up in the trees, whatever it is. There's less of them, but that is such a small thing that isn't really, not that you can't start on with one problem, but like iguanas. I mean, what is your opinion on them? Like, are they really that big of an issue, or is it because they dig holes in banks and rich people don't like their homes having the banks dug out?
I think it's scary, folks. The little anole, one thing, they're cute when they're small, but they get scary when they get big. And most of those older folks, you got to remember, they grew up on the black and whites when they didn't have proper animatronics, so they used iguanas in dinosaur movies. So they're
true. Like, that makes sense. I didn't think about it that way.
And I love them. And my heart as a naturalist, environmental scientist, it kind of shudders, but at the same time, the kid in me, when I see some of these invasive species that are exotic, I'm in love, and I know they're not meant to be here, but I can't help but love you know what I mean? Like,
I agree with you 100%.
But I love it. I mean, Florida right now is, are you familiar with the practice of chameleon farming or reptile farming in the state of Florida?
Yeah. So are you talking about like how people would drop off failed chameleons at like certain spots because they eat a lot? And they come back after a year or two and start collecting the babies, and there's always a population. Yes.
Yeah. And that has taken place over our state, all over the state. So they've got these relic and novel populations of animals. Like I tell people sometimes, some of the things that I tell folks are like, I've been in Florida collecting my whole life. I've never heard of this because there's so many small pockets and small isolated populations of these animals. Brazilian rainbow boas. Listen, people have found everything from crates to cobras.
Yeah.
Free-ranging, and they've wondered, like, well, I hope these aren't breeding here. But you just never really know what's going to turn up. And now the white list for FWC changes every day. And a lot of people are really suffering through that. But I definitely understand the need of those things.
Yes, I understand. A blacklist sounds more like just saying these are things you cannot have. This is the list. Everything else is fair game. Because if you do a white list, there's so many subspecies and blah, 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 blah. You would have to make a white list that no one would be able to even read through.
Exactly. And their names, I wouldn't understand what the Hello Kitty they're saying. But, that's something that we're going to have to figure on and some of these things. And the cat's out of the bag. I mean, some of these established populations are going to be apart. And just like the brown anole in a generation or two, if Mother Nature doesn't turn down the thermostat in a generation or two, guess what? Everybody's just going to assume that iguana is meant to be here. Like most Floridians, 2-3 generations are like, yeah, brown anole has always been. No, they haven't.
What about hogs? Hogs here. Yeah, it's the same thing. I completely do. I agree with you with that. But then what frustrates me the most that has been really getting to me recently is how, like, the Florida panther. Do you know anything about how far north they're moving?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So, like, they're routinely found near the Tampa area, Parrish, all the way up to Lakeland. Like, the I-4 corridor is the thing that's blocking them from really expanding. But south of there, they're seen all the time. They're hit by cars, and most of them are roving males. But if you've watched there's a documentary that came out not long ago, Path of the Panther.
Yeah, with Betty.
It was so good.
Yeah. I haven't seen it yet. When I was at the Mother Earth Day talking with Betty, she told me she was in it. I haven't had a chance yet to take a peek, but I've heard it's really
good. Was so good. And like they did all their stuff at Babcock Ranch. That's where they got the female north of the Caloosahatchee.
Great.
Yeah, it's
Boy Scouts. I did Boy Scouts at Babcock Ranch at Camp Miles, and that's where I saw the skunk ape. We were talking about Sasquatch earlier.
Really?
Mayor, let me tell you the story. It's a fascinating story, and it really. I'd already had some belief systems that I had believed in, but when this happened, there were 4 of us there that night that all saw it, and I do believe that the skunk ape is real. And I know that sounds absolutely crazy. The skunk ape is a novel term for maybe Florida's Bigfoot. Other people call it the skunk ape. I do believe that there could possibly be a North American primate. Could be a skunk ape. And what we saw that night, Camp Miles at the time, I'm not even sure if the Boy Scout ranch is still there, but it's slap dab in the middle of Babcock Ranch, which at the time was the largest cattle ranch outside of Texas, King Range. So about a wide open space for animals to roam, panthers included. But we spent every summer there in the ranch. And one night, as kids often do, I was 13, 14 years old. We were with some of our friends. We were going to go try to steal sodas from the chickie hut. We were going to sneak out of the campsite and walk the mile or two down to the area where you could buy sodas and snacks when it was open. We were going to try to rock a machine, which is deadly dangerous. Don't do that. But we went down there and we were mucking around as kids do and having fun. No sodas. We couldn't get one out. I guess they're smarter. The machines are smarter than a bunch of kids. So we just kind of left empty-handed. But on the way back, I'll never forget, man, every year when I think about it, my friends and I talk about it, we all had different perspectives of the same thing. And 3 of my friends are still alive. One's passed away, but we often talk about what we saw that night. And we have been carrying down the trail. And if you can imagine the trail, it's scrub palmetto, tall palmetto along the path, and jack pine and different things. Regular old Florida, flat as a pancake. A dusty trail, it's maybe 6 to 8 feet wide, just wide enough to get a cart down it if they needed to get a cart. It connects all these different isolated camps at the Boy Scout Ranch. They're all kind of separate, and they've all got different features. You might have one that's on the lake. You might have one that's over in the deep woods. But we were walking along the path. There was about a mile left of our path. One of my friends said, "Hey, there's somebody behind us. We heard something behind us." We assumed at that point that one of our friends had snuck out and was messing with us, wanted to pull our leg. And kind of stuff we would do, So we were just like, let's just keep going. We'll wait for them. We'll scare them. And not long after that, I started to smell something. And I thought one of the guys cut loose. You know what I mean? Like there really is an odor. And it was an odor that I've often described as very much like an egg. When I lived in Ohio, we had well water that was very eggy. So, and it did have a bit of that smell, but it also had the smell of bear. I've worked with bear my whole life. And black bear in particular, they can get pretty stinky. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Why those gnats love following around, but it had that pungent kind of wet bear sulfur smell. We all carry flashlights, but I never use a flashlight at night unless I'm going on a live or something like that. I usually just kind of use my night vision to get from point A to point B. So we were all walking down the path, but the dichotomy from the little bit of moon and the path was bright as it was light and dusty. You could kind of see the path at least. And about that time, we heard something in the palmettos, kind of like a. Have you ever heard a bear bark?
Yeah, the one that they're breathing really heavy. It's like, yeah.
Weird kind of. It was similar to that, but it didn't. It was it was a strange kind of a very personal like. Oh, so we really assumed it was somebody. So my friend Chris Atwood was with us. I'll never forget what he said. I don't curse, so I'm going to just use a stand-in word, but he looked up and he said, "What the F is your problem?"
Yeah.
Turned down those flashlights. When we were kids, we had those big flashlights that were mostly plastic and they had a big battery in it.
Yeah.
They dropped them in the lake. So he turned on this big yellow flashlight and showed it off the path kind of. This thing was standing half on the path and half off the path. It was taller than the saw palmetto. It was maybe 6 foot. It wasn't huge, wasn't 8 foot tall or anything like that. Tall as a big man. And I'll never forget the play of the lighters that traveled up because when we first looked, none of us, your mind doesn't have a point of reference. It's just not here. I don't care what anybody says. You don't automatically look over and go, hey, Bigfoot, how are you? You've got no point of reference because you don't know what the hell you're seeing. You're not supposed to be seeing it anyway. So I'm thinking that it's a guy in a suit or something at first. Like my first instinct was, it went through all these like bear, chimp, person. Yeah, I just didn't know. And then the light, this happens while it's tracking the light. And my friend gets up to the face, and I'll never forget till the day I die. None of us will. The absolute and utter shock of it. It was its face was kind of a cocoa color. Its nose was flattened. You couldn't see ears or anything like that because the hair was kind of draping down over the face a little bit. It looked like a person, like a shaggy person or a Wookiee, you know, but it was standing in such a way that you could see that the arm was long enough that it wasn't natural. It wasn't anatomically a person. You know, there was definitely key features that you automatically, when you see somebody, you know, I have a lot of friends that are you know, differently able than I am, and you can tell when there's differences. You know, somebody's more of a scoliosis or something like that. Of course. But this just wasn't right. You know, the arms were longer, it was hunched over, and I'll never forget the play of the lips when it curled up its lip. You could see big teeth like chiclets. I'll never forget, they were like chiclets, and just big and wide and flat. And it kind of had this look on its face that it was I was terribly frightened. All of us were when it registered, but at the time there wasn't. When I had time to register it later, there never was it wasn't a look of anger. It wasn't a look of I'm going to come and get you. Yeah, it was this kind of this. I'm studying you as you study me. And when it lifted its lip, it didn't look like a smile. It looked like something terrifying, and it was the light switch. I remember hearing my friends choking and gagging on their fear, like, you know, like making little noises of like wanting to get away. So we started running, and I'm not a very fast guy, but I'll never forget the feeling of the wind as I ran. And I remember hearing something behind us that almost was like almost, but not a loud. It was like a what? And it was the weirdest sound. And I ran so fast that night. We ran all the way back to camp. We were all retching, but when I hit camp, we had these tents that were canvas tents. They were on a wooden platform. If the waters came up, you know, you were a little bit off the ground, and they had guidelines down. And I ran so fast, I hit the guideline, and I rolled probably 20 feet, slammed into a picnic table, like boom. Oh. And I remember laying there. My other friends, the whole camp was in an uproar. This is 100%. I have other friends that could tell you the story, and they saw different things. You know, they saw the same thing, but it registered different with them. But that night, it was so bad that our scoutmaster had to tell parents to come and collect the campers. I mean, we were all out of sorts. There was a doctor on site. People were having like panic attacks. That we refused to stay there, the scouts. Oddly enough, and I want to give you some of the backstory so you can make up your own mind here. There's a few very key points. One is the Octagon Sanctuary, which is very close. It's an animal rehab. Happened to have orangutan, happened to have other animals. So there's always that. But what happened after this, I've never even heard of anything like this happening. Within an hour of the campers and stuff going, there were airboats, there were swamp buggies, and there was a helicopter. And they were scouring. There was a lake right next to our camp. And just all the time we were there waiting for our parents, they were looking for something. Somebody later said it was feral hog. I don't believe that to the day I die. I don't believe that. Never heard one shot. And some of the scouts had left after, you know, some of them being treated. Like it was a big deal. And everybody was terrified. Later on over the years, my friends and I have talked about it. What could it have been? What do you think it was? None of us have really any idea. The key points that I want to share. The night before, we had a Seminole ceremony, Order of the Arrow.
I went through the same thing.
Did you?
Yeah, up a little bit north. God, what I don't remember. Sand Lake, I think it was called. Or
I remember you did that.
Yeah,
so you know what it's all about. They think you know all this stuff. Yeah. We didn't know. We had to go do our vigil and then stay out by campfires on our own and everything. And that was all off the table after what we experienced. Nobody was going out to stay alone after that. In fact, they wouldn't let us because of what happened. So that night we had that. But during the Order of the Arrow ceremony that happened, they had dancers and things that were dressed up as animals. Okay. Some of them were dressed up with furs and some of them with other cloaks and things. And some of our scouts and some of the people said, hey, that's what it was. It was just somebody that stole a costume and they tried to scare you. No. Yeah. And I know your mind can supply key details, but no, it's just the face. But there also was the octagon, and they never registered that the orangutan. They said the orangutan. They really researched this. They said, hey, the orangutan's here. He's always been. He never left. He never got out. Nothing. So that was another thing. A lot of scouts, because we had been there to volunteer once or twice, and they had tigers, they had lions and bears. Oh my, they had all the stuff like escaped, circus animals that escaped the circus and didn't have anywhere to go. They ended up in the Octagon Sanctuary type of thing. Great place, love them to this day. But I've often thought, did an animal escape? Did a keeper just neglectfully leave a cage open and they didn't want to get in trouble and the animal came back the next day on his own type of thing? But it was not an orangutan. The color of the fur was not, even if it had been tromping through the mud, it was taller than an orangutan. I worked with orangutan.
Let me ask you this real quick. When it comes to that, so you know about the Mayaca,
Skunk Ape.
the Mayaca, was it anything like that?
Very much. And I've often said, listen, they tried to say those are fake, those photos and everything else. The eye shine, that's the only thing, brother, that doesn't add up.
It looks like a real animal. That Mayaca one. I'm convinced that was at least a real animal. It doesn't look fake.
I believe that too. But the only thing is, none of us remember seeing eye shine that, which detail. That either means that it was a person, it was a human, or whatever this animal is. If it was an animal other than an orangutan, that it also doesn't have eye shine. So I don't know, but there was no eye shine on that animal. There was on the Mayaca, the famous Mayaca skunk ape motors. But that set off something in me. And I never was frightened in the woods before. And I never was really frightened. Again, even after that, like when I got back and I got to settle and calm down and everybody stopped panicking, we all had time to reflect on what happened once we got where I felt was safe, like out of the woods. It was just so shocking, and I'd been in the woods my whole life. I come from a family of naturalists. We're always outside.
Yeah.
Even though my uncle George and dad and stuff believed in the possibility of these things, and I do, but to see something like that, and to have that experience and share it with your friends, even though it was horrifying for us at the time, we still got that experience. We talk about it quite often. And some of my friends are in a position now in life where one of them is a great big fancy lawyer and he's like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's not like me where I don't care if people ridicule him. These are my experiences and people could take them as they are.
I definitely, it's not that things have changed over the years. Like when I was growing up, 100%, you couldn't convince me it wasn't real. No, it's not that I want to believe. I do.
Yeah, me too.
I look at some of these stories that I hear and I'm like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then there's some where it's like, the only thing that's stopping me from believing this is the fact that I don't know if Sasquatch or Bigfoot, whatever you want to call it, is real. And so I hear the story and I think, if this animal is real, this is something that could potentially happen. You don't go above and beyond. You don't say that all of a sudden you start, something starts levitating or it attacked you or whatever. Like it's just it's a quick thing. You see, you smelt, whatever. I can't conclusively say anything because I don't know, but it's that seems more plausible than anything else.
I'm very evidential. And the fact is, are you familiar with George Beals Schaller?
I can't say
George Beals Schaller. He's achieved a National Geographic Lifetime Achievement Award. He was Diane Fossey's mentor. He's been around, wrote the book on bears. But he turned the scientific community on its head, quite literally. When he came out, one of the most well-known scientists of our era. I mean, the man is unbelievable. And he said, I believe in the possibility of Bigfoot. Here's why. People were their jaws, because he's so highly regarded. He was a professor. He was just highly regarded. So to have somebody like him come out and say, I believe in the possibility, had everybody on edge. But what he followed afterwards, it made a lot of friends, made a lot of enemies. He said, but I would like to see true scientific evidence.
Yeah.
That's where we're all at.
I think so too.
Myself included. I don't know what I saw. To be honest, when it comes to cryptids, especially Bigfoot, Sasquatch, Yowie, all these others, I would say 99% of those some of them are outright fabrications. Some are just pure hoax. Some are wishful thinking. Some are mistaken identity. And I want to tell you a really fun story real quick.
Mm-hmm.
I know it's hard for me to do a quick one.
No, you're fine.
Identity in Piscataway, New Jersey. I've been to the town. It's weird when you're in the Garden State because you're downtown, graffiti, there's medications and illicit things all over the ground, and there's herds of white-tailed deer that would have any hunter salivating. bear wandering around all over the place, turkeys. It's like wandering back in time when you're there in the middle of the city. But I was doing the night walk there, and I really enjoyed the area. But there had been people calling about Bigfoot sighting. And brother, when I say that it was an epidemic, people call and they're like, "Hey, calling 911. I just saw Bigfoot. He just walked right across the road. Bigfoot's in my backyard." Like, people were calling, freaking out, for a while. Nobody believed them. At first, everybody was like, "What the hell's going on?" And then the police suspected that there was somebody hoaxing. Somebody was doing this on purpose because they were getting so many calls. They were getting so many calls that they were filtering the calls and saying, "Oh, another Bigfoot call. Put it to the side." Like, that's how they were dealing. And then a state trooper gets on his radio and goes, "You're not going to believe what I just saw." Calls back on the cell phone. I saw Bigfoot. State trooper. Now, imagine. So suddenly you've got somebody that, got no reason to lie. If anything, he doesn't want anybody to really know. The very next day, they capture Bigfoot. They get him dead to rights. It wasn't Bigfoot. It was an American black bear that had both of his front paws mangled in a trap but learned to walk on hind legs. He was out. He's nocturnal, so he's going out at night, hopping across the road on his rear legs. This big, tall, 7-foot tall, 8-foot tall black bear. And people see that going down the road, and their mind automatically fills into pieces because there's no point of reference.
Yeah.
They're going, "Oh, Bigfoot. That's the only thing on 2 legs that's tall and black and hairy." Well, it's supposed to be, but that poor bear.
Yeah.
Yeah. So most of it, hoax, mistaken identity, but every once in a while I get a story. Brother, I get some that just, they hit home. They got all the right pieces. And some of the times I can't even publish those because it's somebody that Dr. So-and-so. Hey, Whereas if the story gets out, so, but what does it boil down to? If there is a Bigfoot, Dean, I believe that it's either a proto-human or it's a near sentient great ape.
I would agree with you. My only thing that's really keeping me back is that with the time that has gone on, the fact that it's just like any other thing that people are like, "Oh, what's that?" And it's always shot on a potato. You can't see what it is. There's always the ivory-billed woodpecker thing. I want to believe that's real. One of my main goals is to go to Arkansas and do a full search. I want to do that. But
let's do it together. I'm with you.
I would love to.
We can make some money doing it too if we get evidence.
I would love to, but that's my thing is every single bit of evidence for that animal, and the ivory billed was real. We have pileatids all over the place. Every picture you see. In 2023, there was just recently, Forrest Galante was going over some video evidence and pictures. I'm like, how can you not get clear pictures with my cell phone? I have a 23 Ultra. This thing's camera can pick up someone's face from a football stadium away. You can't pick up a clear picture of a woodpecker. It does that. That's my problem.
I don't know what it is. And it's likewise with the call. Have you heard the call? Recently, I got some good audio recordings.
Yeah, I have. I believe it's out there.
I do too. I believe it's out there, and I believe there's such a low population density, which is one of the things that I've used to describe the possibility of Bigfoot. Imagine something that has the evolutionary senses that we might have once had, but it has the senses, instinctual sense, and the intelligence that we have. And ultimately, if Bigfoot is out there, it has one main enemy, and that's man.
Yeah.
So I don't think when we hear people saying they're all over Bigfoot, all over if there is such a thing, if there is hairy hominids, and I don't want to just use the term Bigfoot, I'm going to tell you the story of Orang Pendok. You probably already heard it a dozen times. Right now, I've got friends in Indonesia, in the Isle of Fire.
I've seen some videos that are very interesting.
So interesting, brother. I want to be there. If I had the funds, I'd be there.
The guy's on the dirt bikes and it runs in front of him.
Oh man, I just got chills. Yeah. Brother, there's something out there.
I want to believe that, yeah.
Homo floresiensis, the hobbits of Indonesia, right there in the same land. What if these tiny proto-humans, masters of the forest, do you realize if you and I went to the Congo, the Baku people, the pygmies, and they didn't want us to see them, we wouldn't see them. Mm-hmm. We would have no idea that they're there.
Yeah.
And shame, imagine something that actually has the senses, the senses that we used to have maybe once upon a time, evolutionarily speaking.
Well, you got to think the people of the Amazon that have their feet that splay out so that they can climb, all sorts of little advantages like that. As you said, if they don't want you to see them, there's a chance that you're not going to see them. And so that is what helps me. It keeps that little flame alive, so to speak.
The flame keeps me going. But you want to hear something really astounding?
Huh.
Most people don't know this, but have you heard of FUNAI in Brazil? They handle Indian affairs.
Mm-hmm.
My mother's Brazilian Portuguese, and FUNAI handles the Brazilian affairs, Indian affairs, essentially is what they call it. But they believe there's 13 uncontacted tribes in Brazil alone.
I've heard that. I have heard that.
Human tribes. So these are people that, just like the people in Indonesia, the people on the island, the island of doom, I call it, the Sentinelese people.
Yeah.
There are people out there that do not want to be contacted, that do not want anything to do with us, that if anything, only bad stories have trickled down to them in the interior where they're hiding. But if they can do it, then I imagine a highly intelligent animal could likewise do it if they understood the threat that humanity poses. What if the Bigfoot that people are seeing are the old, the dying, the sick? Maybe there is something in it. There's a low population density. But again,
you got a point.
But I don't think we're going to find them in New Jersey. I don't think we're going to. And a lot of it too is the hard science that's being done. And my Uncle George did hard science on Bigfoot for a while. The hard science that's being done is being whitewashed and overwhelmed by the hoaxes. Because guess what? What makes it to YouTube and all these things when some guy, we found Bigfoot, we got him in my freezer out back. I got him here, I can show you. You know what I mean? So people see that. They see guys getting drunk and beating on trees in the middle of the woods, hooping and hollering, wearing their overalls and nothing else, and they go, okay, this is what this is about. But there are people like me. There are people that are actual scientists that are studying it and going, now, wait a second. Some of this DNA we don't have an answer for. Now, with environmental DNA, I think our greatest hope as a cryptozoologist and a zoologist is environmental DNA. We've sampled Loch Ness, and we've proven that there's something in the lake that we don't know what it is. There's fish DNA that we've not been able to match, and it's of an eel. What if Loch Ness Monster all this time has been a large eel? With environmental DNA, we can sample water and we can sample air. I could come to Dean, to your house, and go, yep, he's been here. I got a deep name here. We've had one, boys. We're not far now. Let's get him. So it's a real good thing, but what we're getting with this environmental DNA from some of my friends is they're getting scientific reading, but they don't know what the Hello Kitty they are. It's not correlating to anything that we have. Now, some of these, it says primate. Now, could it be that it's a human, that it's just been degraded or something like that? Sure. But could it be that there's something else out there? I still think there is. And even on our planet, we've compartmentalized the earth. Many of us live in cities, and we're so used to there's no elbow room. There's just got to be people everywhere. But it's just not the case. There's places where it's completely free from human interference. People that study, as doctors that study sound and sound pollution, will tell you that there's isolated spheres on planet Earth where there's no human noise, there's no human interaction at all. Maybe these things have taken to those places and made them their own. And they understand, that if we let our guard down, if you see a human, it's just like when we used to tell our kids stories, hey, look, if you don't behave, the thing under the bed's going to come out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What if they're passing down that knowledge? Like, you smell these things, you see one of these humans, you hear their guns, you get the hell out of there as fast as you can. Make it to safety.
And I definitely see that.
It's a small, but I've often said, I truly do believe with the evidence that we have, if you gave me a jury of my peers and you sat me down and you gave me time, I believe I could prove the case that Bigfoot exists. I really, truly do. I believe there's enough evidence. There's people in prison for the rest of their life on far less circumstantial evidence than the case to present that Bigfoot at least has existed, that he actually exists.
I definitely have that hope.
I might have a hung jury. I might not win it clear, but one or two people on that jury, after they hear all the evidence, is going to go, now wait a second. I used to not believe, but even if it's a little tiny bit, I believe a little tiny bit now, and that's enough.
Yeah.
So who knows what we'll find? It would blow me out of the water if we find them, though.
It's harder now, and this is kind of branching off into the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is the habitat fragmentation. You living in Florida see it. I see it every day, and it infuriates me to watch all this habitat being destroyed. Like, have you been to the St. Cloud area?
Yes.
So I grew up going through there on my way to the East Coast. There's a little town called Hollow Paw, and It was when I was a kid, it was one road, one little strip. There was a light, a gas station, a little strip, and then there was like nothing on it. Now it's a full city with, five, six, $700,000 homes. That is happening everywhere. They're popping up. Parrish, Florida is just turning into these very expensive homes. My point is, with all of these people, especially with places like Florida and South Carolina is another big one. And the reason I bring that up is because alligator attacks have been going nuts. And
sure.
Florida and South Carolina have been the big ones. And I mean, Florida obviously has more, but South Carolina, up until a couple years ago, they had no deaths by gators, and now they've had like 4 in the past 2 years.
Yeah.
Especially like the Hilton Head area. With all that being said, I actually the day that this is going to come out, so tomorrow, there was an alligator attack at Alexander Springs, which is in Ocala.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I don't remember this many happening when I was growing up. Maybe it's because I pay attention to it more. But it seems like, since the 90s, I mean, gators have obviously rebounded. They were almost wiped out.
Oh, absolutely.
And now they're making their way back on top of the human population exponentially growing in Florida. Do you think, with all of these alligator incidents, and not just alligators, but black bears, a lot of black bear attacks?
Yes.
And a few deaths, like all these things that aren't normal. Shark attacks, obviously there was that one in Egypt recently, but like there's been multiple bites off Florida in the past week.
Oh, yeah.
Do you think with this exponential population growth in these areas where these animals aren't used to it, do you think it's our responsibility as people who live on this planet to understand that at some point we have to accept that these animals are going to do their thing, and if we go into their environment, we run that risk? Or do we just wipe everything out? I know that's not the way to go. Do we just wipe everything out that could hurt us?
I know exactly what you mean, and that's been something that's been going on forever. I mean, look at the extirpation of the wolf and the lion from the Carolinas and Connecticut and New York. We don't share space well. We don't play well with others. Let's face it. If you lived in North Carolina and you were a small farmer and a mountain lion killed your pig, you couldn't survive the winter. You couldn't live with a neighbor like that. So we exterminated them. So we're coming to that place in Florida where if we see a lot more of these rise of attacks, we're going to have to start getting serious about what are we going to do. I think education has always been the key. But you're right, with the population growth, with the boom, these alligators are survivors. They've survived 5 major extinction events, and they're surviving the 6th, which is called, of course, the man-made extinction event, the Holocene. So we don't play well with others, and we are a keystone species. I always tell people, I go back to Chief Seattle when he once said that man is not the web of life, he's merely a strand upon it. Whatsoever we do to the strand, we do unto the web itself. So we have this unique position as stewards in the very middle of the web to take care of the planet. But instead, what do? We kind of take, and do as we will. The sharks, the alligator attacks, more people are going outside now. We see the correlation. I could pull up the data right now on the alligator attacks and the shark attacks. During COVID, guess what happened? There weren't as many attacks. So what does that tell us? That tells us that we're the difference, aren't we? When we push into their territory, we're the difference. It's not them. They're not coming to us during COVID, coming in our homes and attacking us.
True.
We go out to the outdoors and we interact in the outdoors. And let's face it, our ancestors understood that the outdoors were a dangerous place. We've forgotten that. Joggers in Idaho, running with their damn earphones on. In mountain lion country, they get attacked and people go, what the hell? Now we got to go hunt mountain lions. No, you don't. All you had to do is know that and respond accordingly and have some respect in mountain lion territory. The same with bears and things. People have this idea in our superiority. People are always shocked to know the statistics when it comes to bear attacks, how many people were armed. In many of the videos I do, people are like, I had my 45 or I've had my 357. They did. That's why they got attacked. I could tell you multiple stories of old timers in Alaska saying, I got attacked because I had this idea that my sidearm was an equalizer, and it wasn't. I walked through a path that I knew I shouldn't have taken. I should have went around to the water to do my fishing, but I figured since I got the old iron on my hip, I'll be fine. Bear didn't think so. Bear took their scalp. So it's a matter of respect and education, but we're going to see more alligator attacks, and something that chaps my ass, and I'll be honest with you, are when people downplay it. They humanize, they anthropomorphize the swamp puppies and, they're not dangerous. Once they get to a certain size, you're on the damn menu, whether you like it or not. Once they've worked their way up, when they're little, they eat little things. When they get big, they eat big things, and we're on the menu. We're meat and bones and flesh and sustenance to animals. Now, they don't go out of their way to hunt us because most animals have instinctual awareness of our danger. We're also a predator. The very smell of a human in many places will cause that animal to leave. In other places, especially protected places, and this is the problem and the caveat here, because in protected places, when animals lose fear of being hunted, then there's a different dichotomy, there's a different relationship now, between us and them. So I don't have those answers. I don't think anybody does when it comes down to it. When it comes to places like Yellowstone.
Oh, God, the bison.
With everything, people just have this idea. We don't understand the inherent danger because we see people swimming with sharks. And I'll be honest with you, cage diving and swimming with sharks and feeding alligators to me are the same thing, baiting alligators and feeding them. They're intelligent animals. We don't give shark and alligator enough credit.
Yeah.
They're in an order of magnitude of intelligence that is different than ours, not greater or less than ours, but different. And you have to understand, when we start coming down to what it means to be a successful animal, they've been around for how long? We've been around for how long? And I'll tell you, what I'm seeing right now from humanity as a species isn't looking too good. We'll probably end up destroying ourselves before long if we can't get this crap together.
You got a point.
Sharks will eat each other, yes, but they're not doing some of the things we're doing. So a different order of intelligence, and we always try to judge animal intelligence based upon our own, which is a big mistake. Sharks, when you're baiting in sharks to a shark diving cage, of course it's fun. But these sharks understand now that, hey, they associate us with feeding and food. Same with alligators. Why do you think they have a big hard on for not feeding alligators? Because they're smart. Alligators in the state of Florida, people don't realize this. If you walk your little dog, let's just say you walk your dog back behind the little canal by your house all the time. Some days you got him on the lead, some days you don't. Well, you don't realize that there's an alligator in there that's been watching you for weeks. He can afford to go without a few meals. He's looking at that dog and he's going, sometimes this little dog comes down and gets a drink of water and it's not on that leash, and one of those days I'm going to be there. And sure enough, that alligator, after 10, 12 days of watching, it can afford to be patient. It waits for the little dog to come down. Now, maybe the little dog's on a leash and the old lady pulls the dog out of the way. Alligator's not going to go out empty-handed or empty-mouthed. It's going to grab the next closest thing, an old lady that's standing on the bank. So this is how this happens. People have an utter disregard. They move from someplace else. Listen, I grew up in Ohio. It was a lack of education. I didn't know any better. Some of the stuff I did, I just didn't know any better. I didn't have people telling me. But the fact is, we need to get it together with people coming in and saying, hey, here's the rules if you want to stay alive in the state.
I think there needs to be an education thing, yeah.
Don't do this, but outright culling the animals and getting rid of the animals, maybe it'll get to that point. But right now, as I see it, the population is stable and healthy of the American alligator, in the state of Florida. There's been an American crocodile attack, too. And American crocodile, there's only been one that was of any note. But, they've got a very low population density, and they're still in attack. And yet people say, hey, they're a completely harmless animal. Booey, they're not.
They're not harmless.
They kill people quite regularly down south.
I call them swamp puppies. I do, but it's more along the lines of, I understand that in the right circumstances, to somebody who knows what they're doing and is trained, they can be the friendliest of all the crocodilians.
Oh, yeah, I do disregard that.
But as you said, there are people who make it seem like it's no big deal to interact with them on a daily basis, and they feed the videos of the wild alligators being fed chicken and brought on the boat and pet, and I'm sitting there you are literally killing that. A fed gator is a dead gator. There's a reason for it. And there's some people who argue that, if you capture an alligator and release it somewhere else, that it's going to be scared and won't do anything. Sure, that may be the case, but that's not what the state does. The state will kill them.
Yeah.
That's it. That's it. And so, as soon as that alligator, even as, I grew up near Taylor Park, where that disc golf guy was killed last year.
Yeah.
I actually am doing a video, and I was down there, and I went to the spot and everything. I'm talking about it, but the point is that those alligators, there were two big ones that were in there. and they lived on opposite sides of the lake, and they would meet up sometimes in the middle, and they'd fight, and they'd bellow at each other. I grew up seeing those two specific alligators.
Yeah.
I went there. I did not see a single alligator the entire time. You always could see at least one.
Yeah.
And it's like, it breaks my heart because I'm sitting there. I literally went to my elementary school was across the street, and we would walk over on the trail and go to that park. And like, I was taught how to run away from alligators at that exact spot.
Mm.
And people don't think, like, they're like, oh, it's an alligator, it's not a big deal, you'll see them everywhere. But those animals live a long time.
They do.
You get used to seeing those specific ones. I knew to stay away from the water. I knew not to swim.
Mm-hmm.
Never was an issue. But a guy decides to go swimming. He knew the dangers. He was interviewed about it before. The next thing you know, he's killed, and now there's no gators in there because they killed anything above 4 foot.
That's what they do.
Yeah.
That's what
the guy who was at that bar recently in Mayaca got his arm bitten off. He was lucky to survive. That gator's now dead, and that was a big gator.
I covered that, and kind of a weird story. I covered it, told the truth of what happened, and one of my friends knew him well and asked me to take the videos down, and I did.
Really?
What was said about everything that happened there wasn't all that happened there.
From what I understood, but they had been down a few times or something like that, and throughout the night he decided to go out there alone and messed with it, and that's what I heard. Of course, things could be different.
Yeah, he gave an interview, and I'll just say this, and I won't say any more.
That's fine. Yeah.
What he said in the interview did not add up with what I was told from multiple other sources with that.
Gotcha.
Understandably, certain things have to be said to keep someone from hot water.
Of course. So yeah, that's fine. It's insane to me, and it's sad. Obviously, when an old lady is in a retirement community and she's walking her dog and the gator, kills her.
Terrible.
It's a terrible situation. At the same time, there is a certain level of accountability that needs to be had, and regardless of whether it's if you live in that community,
mm-hmm.
and they're in there, it's not like someone who lives there doesn't know there's an alligator there.
Absolutely.
There needs to be some sort of I don't know, education, as you said, education on it. There needs to be something, because these animals mean something to me. I'm sure they mean something to you. They mean things to the natives that live there. And when you take over all these places, you put in a new golf course, you put it in a new, all these homes, all these retirement communities, all these things that you're moving into where they always were. Where do we put them?
I think what people want is a Yellowstone made out of the Everglades. They'd be quite content to know that every alligator in Florida was in the Glades. They could go see them there. I think that's what they would like, most people.
I can see that, but no.
If you look at history, back in the 19 and 20s, they were regularly hunting and killing 18-foot bull American alligators. 18 freaking foot.
I've heard stories, yeah.
And the fact is, we've destroyed their genetics.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, what people don't realize, like you said, those two alligators going head to head, they were fighting over breeding rights.
Mm-hmm.
Inevitably, the good big man's going to beat the good smaller man. The good big alligator is going to beat the little alligator. He's going to chase him out of territory. He's going to cover and breed all those females. Those clutches of eggs are going to carry Big Daddy's genetics. When the skin trade and the meat trade came along, and our ancestors, the big hats like I wear, came and started shooting with long guns, dynamiting, trapping, poisoning these alligators, they were after the biggest because it meant the most return for their market value, bigger skins, more money, more meat. So they went and killed all the big daddies. Guess what happened? All the little guys are like, yay! All the betas were coming out of the woodwork. Oh, we finally get some ladies.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So all these little alligators are covering the females now. They wouldn't have won that fight with big guys. They would have had their arms ripped off. They would have been chased out of territory until they were big enough to mate, fight,
they have to wait until they're big enough and strong enough to do it themselves. Right. Yeah.
Yeah. I see these shows where these people are, shoot them in the head. We got the biggest alligator of the season. It was a 12-footer. And I'm thinking it's because your great granddaddy took the 20-footer.
Yeah.
You dummy. So that's what we're gonna see. And the FWC, who's supposed to protect these animals, is doing the same thing, because when an alligator gets more than 4 feet long, all of a sudden it's a danger.
They'd rather kill an alligator than save it any day.
Yeah. Or your grandmother lives in that retirement community. You can't have an alligator there. You know, where's he to go?
Yeah.
Where's the alligator to go?
And like, there's the one that I covered. I covered it today in a video that's coming out tomorrow as well. Alexander Springs, that whole situation. One of the key points I made in that video was, if Alexander Springs is not a safe place for an alligator to live, where is? Because it's in the middle of the Ocala National Forest, which it's like, I believe it's the biggest forest in Florida.
Love it. Yeah, I love it.
I love it out there too. There's nowhere around it. It's like one little thing where people go and swim and snorkel. It was guarding its nest, and it was a 7-foot alligator, and they killed it.
Jeez.
Where is that thing supposed to go? If not that place, where?
Yeah, what'll end up happening, I believe, is we'll have places where alligators are allowed to be in the state of Florida and where they're not allowed to be. And I think we'll get to that point, because if we're going to see more human-alligator interactions that are negative, then we're going to see more people afraid of alligators. When I do my videos, people call me a fearmonger, but at the end of the day, I guess I am. Because fear and respect to me are extraordinarily closely aligned.
They are.
It's fear that keeps me out of the polar bear enclosure when I go to the Toledo Zoo. You know?
Yeah.
I'll go, hey, buddy, I respect you. I wouldn't walk in and take anything out of your fridge. It's absolute fear, because I know if I jump in there, then I'm dinner.
Oh, yeah.
So fear is a damn good thing.
It is.
And it's a damn good thing for us instinctually. You know, a little child crawling away from a cave, you know, when we were still living in caves. If it encounters something unfamiliar, not being afraid of it is a death sentence.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, the people need to fear bison in Yellowstone and realize that, like, a woman was just gored, like, the other day, and she had to go to the hospital. It's like, what do you think is going to happen? What do you think walking up to that multiple 1,000-pound animal, you know, because it looks like a big, soft, fluffy cow, that it's not going to hurt you? Bulls are one of the most dangerous things in the world. They kill more people every year than sharks have in multiple years.
They don't mess around,
They
man.
don't.
And, you know, that's another thing, too. America gets kind of you know, they don't have enough respect for American wildlife. You know, when we go to Africa on safari, we're terrified, right? I ain't going there. I'm not sleeping in a cloth tent, you know, but
Yeah.
But anyway, you know, America, people don't realize the animals here that can't kill you. They're not going out of their way, the black bear, but I cover so many black bear attacks, and I often tell people, as far as a predatory, did you know, Dean, this is pretty cool. We all know that polar bears are highly carnivorous, the most obligate carnivore of the bears.
Mm-hmm.
If they attack us, it's predatory, you know, 9 times out of 10, predatory attack. But studying these things, I mean, I could show you the list, compile a list, and others have. Right there underneath the polar bear is at 87% fatality rate when it comes to predatory attack. Do you know that the black bear checks in at 86.8 for predatory attacks?
I didn't know that, but I did.
86.
I found out recently about the whole predatory black bear thing because I never looked into it.
Yeah.
And there was the guy in Arizona recently that was on his back porch and he was predatory attacked. I did not know that the black bear attacks, when they do attack you, it's not good.
That's why I say, you know, play dead, get dead. That's one of my sayings. Play dead, get dead. Your only chance against a carnivore that wants to eat you, and I tell people this all the time, remember this, it's important. You have to fight back, whether it's a polar bear, black bear, grizzly bear, whatever. Now, very rare circumstances, if you know bears and animal psychology, would be a good opportunity not to fight back against a mother and cubs. But many times it's a predatory attack, and the mother will let the cubs finish you off. You know, like it'll turn into a predatory attack, even if it's a defensive attack. So you got to fight back with whatever you can do. Now, with black bears, and I tell people this, and it makes sense when I say this, who doesn't like an easy meal?
Yeah.
All the bear's concerned with is killing you and eating you. If you're already playing dead, he's just going to start eating until you are dead. You have to fight back.
I'll say they're scavengers too. They'll eat whatever they can.
They can. And when they do attack, it's a real sloppy predatory attack. They're not very good at it.
They just rip you apart.
They just start eating, man. It's bad. I've seen corpses. I've seen people. I've seen somebody that was attacked, their body after they were attacked in a predatory attack. I was one of the first people on site. And you think you're seeing something from a horror movie, like your mind doesn't really comprehend, like, oh my God, his intestines, they shouldn't be there. You know, they shouldn't be like this. The meat of the hands and everything, the face, gone. And it's a brutality to know. People don't realize when young Olga and her father in Russia were eaten by a bear, she was on the phone with her mother over a period of an hour, near an hour, 39 minutes or something, where she called her mother 3 times while she was being eaten by a bear. True story, literally. Talk to her mother. Can you imagine your child calling you, mom, being eaten by a bear? But that's how people say you're putting on. But no, there's more than, I can tell you a dozen stories right now of people living for over a half an hour while being eaten by a bear. And you're like, how is that even
I'm
possible?
glad we don't have the Treadwell tapes.
It's bad. It's bad. And, we ran into a black bear last night on my live. I took a ride down Shell. Do you know where Shell Road is? Shell Island Road. It's heading into, like, right when you go into the Everglades on the right on Collier. Well, maybe if we get a chance to Creech, we'll go.
I've probably passed it. I just don't know it by name.
Well, maybe we could ride bikes and really get to see some really cool native animals.
I'd love to.
Panther. But I was down there at about 3:30 this morning. I rode to Marco Island from Naples because I couldn't sleep and I was going to take a ride with our friends. And I go down the road and I cross through the fence and there's a big pile of steaming poop in the middle of the road. And it looked just like human poop at first. Like, it was so weird. But it was so fresh that even though it was super hot out, you could pretty near see the steam. And I'm like, okay, whoever just dropped this is up close. So I kept riding on my bike. And remember, I'm out there. There's nobody else out there. It's the heart of the Everglades pretty much. So you can't even hear cars anymore. And I see this great black bear sitting right in the middle of the damn road. And he doesn't take off when he sees me. He just kind of looks at me. And so I kind of ease my bike up and I go, hey, bear. He didn't budge. So I said, goodbye, bear. And I turned around the bike and I got the hell out of it. At one point, I stopped to see a frog on the side of the road. And they're like, what are you doing? Stop it. There's a frog. Get out of there. Like, the bear's behind you. But it was just, I respect them enough to know, okay, you're already here. It's like when I go somewhere and I'm camping and I got my Speedo on. I don't want to be messing around if I found that campsite. Leave me alone. I claimed it first.
Yeah.
That bear, he wanted the road. He could have the road. And I told my people on the way back, I said, he just got done voiding his bowels. He made plenty of room, and I didn't want to be in there. But black bear, they're one of my favorites, Ursus americanus, and I've worked with them for a very long while. And I grew up working with black bear. I worked at a place called Jungle Larry's here. I don't know if you've ever heard of Jungle Larry's, but it's now called Naples Zoo.
Okay.
And Zoological Gardens. And there was an attack there about 2.5 years ago. A janitor that was supposed to be working was taking Instagram and taking videos and Tik Tok lives and stuff when he was supposed to be working, and he was getting close to the animals, and he got nabbed up by a tiger, grabbed him by the arm and about chewed his arm off, and they came and they killed the tiger.
Yeah.
They couldn't get him away, which understandably, when I worked there, we got a few different means of separating someone from a big cat, but ultimately that's sometimes the only way when they
sadly
told you there's nothing you can do.
And like, I'm not against, this is one thing I try to tell people, I'm not against like killing an animal in a humane way. Like when it comes to hunting, like I'm a hunter, I fish, I am not against any of it. I love meat. I think meat's fantastic. But there's just a difference between an animal doing its natural thing and going after a person and going out to sustain yourself. And like, that's also part of the environment. You are part of the ecosystem.
Absolutely.
Even if we live outside of it, technically, we're still a part of the natural order. And so like, we think we're above it. We always think we're above it. And
people that have never fished and hunted don't really understand where that fish fever and buck fever comes from, but it's in here. It's in our very DNA, and it's a risk and reward thing. When you catch a fish or you shoot a deer, people that do, they get this overwhelming rush of adrenaline and dopamine, right? And that's your reward. You just fed your whole family.
Yeah.
With your bow and arrow, your gun, your spear, whatever it was, no matter how far back you go, and you just made sure that you got to eat and your family got to eat for a few days. I mean, that's like winning the lottery, so that's built in. When people, it's very natural to hunt, to forage and different things. And that's still, even though we grocery store hunt these days, it's still in our very DNA as hunters and gathers. And when people do hunt for the first time or catch their first fish, that exhilaration, it's the same as when a hunter kills his first deer. And like you said, trophy hunting and things have never been my bag. I'm not a hunter, but I always have been a forager. Mm-hmm. If I'm stripping and there's a squirrel on a tree, a squirrel's going to go into a pot. You know what I mean? These days I don't trophy fish. When I fish, if I catch a fish that's too big for me to eat, He goes back in the drink. I don't even take him out. I'm only after specific fish that I can eat. You know, if I want to eat it, I'll eat it. That's it. Nothing against. I always tell people that too. They think that since I'm an environmental steward that I'm a tree hugger, and I love my trees. I love trees, man. But that I'm like, you know, I'm like, animals rule and every person should be exterminated. I don't think that. But
I'm a people first person.
Yeah, I'm people first, but we need to learn to get along.
Yes.
We need to all people first. Now, I say people first, but there's some situations where I say people need to get the hell out of there.
Yeah.
You know?
I say, oh, you deserve that one.
Yeah. There's certainly some people that have, I think they call it the Darwin Award. But
yes.
When it comes right down to it, I believe there can be a balance. There can be some form of homeostasis between us and the animals that we fear, that we live alongside. And it comes down to education, people doing the right things when they're in those territories. You know, don't make yourself an easy meal. Don't look like prey. Don't do something foolish. Don't do something stupid. You know, don't provoke an attack, certainly, but the unprovoked attacks are the things that we have to be concerned with. And most people don't realize that most of the animals that are put down are from provoked attacks.
Yeah.
Some messed with the bear. They've messed with the animal. They've done this. They've done that. They went up and pet the bison. They've handled the snake. So should the animal die for situations like that? You know, that we got all these different questions and very little answers when it comes right down to it. But I do believe that we can get along, and I believe that it comes right down to education, to letting people know the possible dangers of these animals and the rewards, you know, and the fact that I always use, and I know that we have limited time here, I got to get to the dentist, but
absolutely,
I always use the copperhead as an example. Right now we're studying copperhead venom. You and I have talked about this, I think, but copperhead venom has some of the most potent anti-cancer fighting abilities for certain types of brain cancer, the proteins. And there's a lot of people out there that if they had the power of Thanos, they would just say, get rid of all snakes.
Yeah.
Right now. Boom. All snakes are gone. It might be possible that the thing that we fear in that venom could be the thing that saves us from cancer.
Absolutely.
These animals that we don't have a high regard for, they might be the ones that end up saving us, whether it's a Virginia opossum, whether it's an axolotl, whether it's a tardigrade, whatever it is. If we exterminate any one of those things, then we're exterminating the hope of our future. Because what if that tardigrade is the only way we're getting off planet Earth to colonize other planets someday, and or whatever else it is, and we just go, oh well, you know, the passenger pigeon, they're tasty. Little do we know that maybe if we had studied the amazing sense of homing that they had, it might have helped us with this or helped us with that. But instead, we ate them until there were no more to eat. And on the front line of that were people saying, oh, these pigeons will be around forever. Just look at them, miles and miles of pigeons. It was the food of the poor. And within a century, guess what?
They're gone.
Yeah. So I'm hoping that's not going to happen with some of our other critters.
I am right there with you, and I think we can definitely figure. I think we can figure it out. I think that the next generation coming up too is going to kind of start to see that it's not just one side of an issue or another. There is a bridge. There is a gap that can be bridged.
And it's so political, you know, politics, and listen, politics in nature is a huge thing. Whether you're talking wolves, or you're talking hunting, you're talking hunting rights, it really is big. And that can muddy the water too.
It can.
People fight against the other end just to fight the middle.
Hey man, I really do appreciate you coming on here, and it's been great talking to you. Seriously.
Wish me luck at the dentist, all right?
Absolutely. Where can everybody find you? What is all your stuff?
Well, you can go to, mostly I'm on TikTok these days, at The Creature Preacher, but if you look up The Creature Preacher on Instagram or on Facebook, you'll see me there too, and we're going to be more active there. We're currently developing a television show, and Dean, you know, I'd love to have you out on there sometime.
I would love to.
But we're currently developing, it's called The Creature Chronicles, and it's going to be stories and more. You know, a little bit, I always say that Steve Irwin's a big hero. It's going to have a Steve Irwin flavor with a lot of the adventure, but there's going to be a little bit of Anthony Bourdain and a whole lot of X-Files.
Nice.
We'll talk about all these things, but it's what we talked about. It's going to be hopefully to inspire the next generation, because I'm pretty old. I'm getting worn out, and we need some new, younger pups to take up the mantle. So, we'll do that. But Dean, thank you so much for the content you create, for being so awesome, and looking out for us all. I really enjoy it, and I hope that my friends, if they get to see this, will become your friends as well.
I appreciate that. I hope so too.
Amazing passion. But thank you, brother, and I hope we'll get to do more. Guys, if you want to see Dean and I go out creeking one night, catching snakes and wrangling pythons, and let us know. Make it happen. Help us make it happen.
It will happen. It will happen very soon.
All right, brother. You be well.
Hey, you too.
Take care.
All right, bye.